welcome to the evening meeting of the December 5th session of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business is an announcement. In our morning session, we had a ballot to vote on the Veteran Services Advisory Board. We had one position and 3 applicants. The applicant that was voted in was Bradley Palmer. He was reappointed, and I look for a motion to appoint Bradley to that board. The term expires December 31st, 2025.
I move that we appoint Bradley Palmer to the Veterans Advisory Board.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the appointment, please say aye. Aye. Appointment is carried through. The other announcement is applicant for cases 2217 and 2218 Shenandoah Homes. In both cases has requested that these be postponed until the February 6th, 6 o'clock meeting. The board will postpone these 2 cases during approval of the agenda. So, with that, that brings us to the approval of the agenda. If there's no changes, do I hear a motion to approve?
I move the agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
All right, and that is with the postponing of those 2 cases. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, next up, we have public comments. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward and speak, you have 3 minutes to discuss something that is not already on the agenda. And we just ask that you keep it cordial. And if you would come forward and state your name and your town or township that you're from, that would be all we ask for. So is anyone here to make a public comment? And Madam Clerk, do we have okay, and none, so we will move on to the next item, which is case 2227 and conditional zoning district hearing. And I will call on Braxton Newton, our planning director, for background.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Good evening. Our first case this evening is case 22-27. This petition to rezone 3.73 acres located at 4880 NC Highway 96 in Selma Township from agriculture residential to general business conditional zoning district. Owner Blade Hunter Purdue, applicant Adams and Hodge Engineering. Conditional zoning request is particular use is outdoor storage. Utilities and services provided by Northside Fire District and Thanksgiving Rescue. This property is surrounded by properties that have the land use of residential and agriculture, also a woodworking shop, and that is zoned I-1. A gas station, auto service station, that is zoned CB, which is community business, and then general business, special use district. That is a Dollar General. There's also a manufactured home park nearby as well. The traffic concerns or traffic count for this portion of Highway 96 is 2,100 vehicles per day. This is a 2018 count. And Highway 96, this portion of Highway 96 does not appear on our CTP as, or appears as an existing major thoroughfare needing improvement. Our land use plan does indicate this as being in a secondary growth area. Be glad to answer any questions you may have. There are proposed conditions as well, as you will see in the application or the applicant's response.
All right. Any questions at this time for Mr. Newton? All right. Hearing none, I would ask that the applicant come forward regarding the request and proposed conditions.
Good evening. Donnie Adams, 314 East Main Street in Clayton. I am with Adams and Hodge Engineering. We're the engineer on this project. So as Braston said, what we got before you is an outdoor storage. It is a total outdoor storage facility, not to be confused with any type of mini storage, total outdoor. As he said, also, this is identified on the comprehensive growth plan as a secondary growth area. It's also the intersection of Little Divine and Highway 96 is a neighborhood center. And it acts that way with the uses mentioned. This site is approximately a quarter mile from there or slightly less than that. Our layout of the site is very typical to the last few that I brought before you. We're proposing the perimeter to be protected with combination of landscaping and fencing, and that's covered specifically in the conditions of use. There are about 15 conditions of use on that. We've gone through the planning board. A couple were added in that process, which got us up to 15 as well. The owner is here tonight. He has had opportunity to review the conditions, and he can affirm for himself, but I'll affirm for him that he has no issue with those. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? All right. Is there anyone else wishing to make any comments? Yes, please.
I don't know if I'm right or I have to.
No, come on up, state your name and address, please, for the record.
I'm Annette Caldera, 5014 Highway 96. And what they're talking about is connecting to my backyard, and I'm not trying to take away nothing from nobody, but I don't understand is what's going to come through my yard, or how's it going?
Do we have the plans where we can put them up on the screen? Yeah, I was gonna say. Is there a way we can get that up there? Yeah, let's give us a second to see if we can get a technology.
Can I ask her a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Calder.
Annette, are you on the 96 side or the Little Divine side? Does your house face Little Divine or 96?
It's right in front of the Dollar General on 96. And it's,
Okay.
the deed's being done in my name. Norwood Norris is my daddy. He died March the 30th. And all that'll be finished up before the end of the year.
Egress is out on 96.
Yeah. So, would you like him to explain what the drawing says? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, okay.
Okay. You want to ask me, or you want me to point out?
Well, so, Donnie, I will,
Your property is here.
Okay.
so I hate to ask, but you're gonna need to do it from over here, so.
You have a pointer?
No, we don't. We need to add that to our bag of tricks.
Okay, so I'm over there. Okay, the only question I got is there's this little piece of property that goes on, from the driveway down, there's a house on the right, and I'm the house straight down. And there's a little bit of land right between us that belongs to that man because of the water perking or something. There ain't nothing gonna go between my yard and my neighbor's yard.
Okay, so I think I understand where you're talking about. I believe you're talking about, can you tell the property that we're talking about developing? I'm gonna point to it. Make sure it's there. 96, the property, I think you're talking about the finger up here at the top.
Okay,
Your property's here, and I think the gentleman that spoke at the planning board would be directly to the west of there, is that correct?
yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So, no, there is no plan for development in there. The outdoor storage area will stop about 3/4 of the way through the property. Here, there's an existing pond back here. It won't
Yes,
go
sir.
beyond that. It won't go up into that finger that you're talking about.
Okay. Well, then I'm happy with that.
All right, yeah, we got somebody leaving happy tonight. So that- I think I wish that wasn't the exception. I wish that was the rule, but, all right, so let me see, anybody else here for public comment on this project? All right, I will close the public discussion portion of the hearing and ask for Braxton to come forward and summarize and present the planning board's recommendations.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, the planning board does recommend approval of case 22-27 from agriculture residential to general business conditional zoning district, with the stated conditions being 15 of those. Would ask that we get the applicant and/or owner's agreement, at least verbal acknowledgement of those.
We do. Will, before, is that any other updates from you on that? And
That'd be awesome.
I'll ask, yes, Mr. Perdue to come forward, and I guess you do need to state your name and address, but then make sure you're agreeable to all the conditions.
My name is Blade Perdue. I live at 29 Texas Cattle Drive in Clayton. Address is 4880 North NC 96 Highway, and I agree with the terms and conditions that you got.
All right.
No, we're-
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to point out that with the pending changes that we might be making to our land use plan and the parking and helter-skelter of vehicles parking here and there, this outdoor storage is going to get to be a commonplace thing, I think. If they're well done, they're actually a good thing for the community. You don't end up with so many vehicles parked in like back alleys and driveways and front yards and everything. They got somewhere they can put them. I really think there's a need for this type of operation.
All right, any other comments or questions? Then I will close the hearing and see if there's a motion one way or the other on this.
I'm very familiar with that area out there, and it is a business community. There's a lot of residents, but there's also a lot of active, viable businesses right there in that intersection. Towards that end, I move to adopt a statement of consistency resolution as presented in the agenda packet and approve the rezoning request with the conditions that were outlined herein for case number 2227.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have rezoning hearing for case 2228. And I will ask Mr. Newton to come forward again with the background and lead a discussion on this.
Chairman, before we start, I'd like to make a motion to recuse myself for purposes of being involved in this transaction.
All right,
I'll second.
So how about if you make the motion? I don't know. Can you make, can
Yeah.
she make the motion to recuse herself? Okay, well, there you go. We got a motion and a second. Do we need to state a reason or just ask to be recused?
Can do that on her own.
Okay,
She doesn't need an approval for that.
okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right, Braxton.
Yes, sir. Case 22-28 is a map amendment, a petition to amend the zoning map, official zoning map, to remove a particular parcel from the environmentally sensitive area, which is one of our overlay districts. The parcel in question is identified by tax ID 11L05023Q. The property owner is John Robert Foscue and Rainey Celeste Foscue. The applicant is Adams and Hodge Engineering. With regard to our land use plan, this property is designated as secondary growth area. And I've included in your packet in the staff report a description of, or an excerpt from our land development code, which describes our environmentally sensitive area overlay district. And if I'll direct your attention to the ortho photo from Johnston County GIS or Johnston County Map Click. And what you'll see is a shaded area there, a hashed area. This is the boundary, the county's boundary for the environmentally sensitive district or overlay district. This does encompass about 3/4 to 2/3, 2/3, 3/4 of the property. This property has been approved for a 35-lot residential development. This would not, if this is removed from the environmentally sensitive area, this would not have any impact on that approval in terms of giving them the opportunity to create more lots. I think it would move some lot lines, which is considered a minor modification and a staff approval of such. But we will, I think the applicant will provide you with some evidence or testimony that may justify removal of the ESOD. Staff has reviewed it, and staff, we have actually forwarded to our Public Utilities Department and our stormwater engineer, and they have no concerns over that. And be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of Mr. Newton? I did have one, and it's not specific to this case, but this is not the first time we've had to read it. So is that a project we would undertake? How do we clean this up, or we just deal with it on a case-by-case basis?
No, I think we'll clean it up. So we'll have to evaluate or do the analysis to determine, number one, we kind of need to know historically how this boundary became or was developed. I'm not going to say it was arbitrary, but I don't have anything to refute that at this point. So we will look at that, and we will probably most likely look back at and for reference to North Carolina HUC maps and see where they actually correspond with our ESOD and the applicable those water bodies that the ESOD exists to protect. So we'll be looking to do that in the very near term.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
Yes, sir.
So back to this case then, I'd ask the applicant or their representative to come forward now and present items for us to consider on this.
Good evening again. Donnie Adams, 314 East Main Street, Clayton, North Carolina, with Adams and Hodge Engineering. So we're talking about the ESOD, the Environmentally Sensitive Overlay District. And it's basically topo-driven or contour-driven. In the past, this isn't the first case as you mentioned, but in the past, prior to some of the zoning changes, this has been something that was handled at the engineering level, handled at public utilities when we're going through erosion control or stormwater process. Now that it's associated with the zoning in the difference between being in the ESOD and outside the ESOD, outside the ESOD is a 30,000 square foot minimum lot size. Inside the ESOD is a 40,000 square foot minimum lot size. That's why we're coming before you at the zoning level. Bottom line is, on this particular site, a quick evaluation of the contour. The existing contour shows that all the water runs away from the ESOD. And there's a couple of graphics that are should be part of your package showing basically, bottom line is the Jordanarian Road is for the most part a high point to consider, and our site is on the outside of that and drains away from it again.
All right. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Anyone else here for public comments on this? All right. I will close the public discussion portion of the hearing and call Mr. Newton to come forward and summarize and present the planning board's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to case 22-28, which is a requested map amendment of the ESOD with respect to the subject property, the planning board does recommend approval and offers for your consideration a statement of consistency.
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If I understand this right, Braston, if we approve it, the minimum lot size will be 30,000 throughout.
Yes, sir.
And if we don't, the part in the environmental sensitive area would be 40,000.
Would be 40,000, yes, sir.
And the reason that it's not applicable is because of the contour just doesn't match the map overlay.
Essentially, yes, sir. It does. The drainage for the property does not flow to one of those identified water bodies based on the topographic information we have
An error in
available.
the topo.
Do what?
An error in the topo.
Well, It may have just, it looks like to me it's an arc of a circle drawn around Cattail Pond, you know.
Well, that's the difficulty we're having with the ESOD is we're not, and there's several different locations within the county that, where the ESOD is established. We're not really sure. We just don't have the historical data or information to show exactly how they derived it. Those,
Sound like it was done from an airplane.
so it's a little different.
All right, any other questions? All right,
I personally would like to see minimum lot size of 40, but only because that's a rule, not because of this technicality here.
all right. All right, any other questions, discussion, comments? All right, I'm going to close the hearing and turn it over to the board for deliberation and/or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a statement of consistency resolution as presented in the agenda packet and approve this rezoning request.
Have a motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion to adopt the statement of consistency resolution as presented in the agenda packet and approve the rezoning request, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, in my haste to get started, I skipped over a third item on the agenda, which is an easement request from the DOT. We've heard this twice, and so the third time may be the charm, so.
Well, I can be the second person you make happy tonight.
Oh, yeah, there we go. We're on a roll then.
As you know, I'm Denise with the Department of Transportation, and we are requesting some easements over the bridge on 210 at Muddy Creek. We are requesting one permanent drainage utility easement, which is 0.023 acres, two permanent drainage easements, one of which is 0.019 acres, the second is 0.005 acres, and then one temporary construction easement, which has 0.072 acres. The temporary construction easement would terminate at the close of construction. You know that there is an on-site detour for the bridge. I believe you have some plans in front of you showing that. And
So so I know you put some plans up, but they're not up here anymore. Yeah, I don't have mine.
I haven't seen it.
I think they got taken up. I watched him put them down.
the most thing.
Who took them?
Yeah,
We just,
yeah, I think we're okay with it. As you describe it, I'll
we know.
no,
make
we
it
want you
worse.
to come back another meeting. We've got used to you coming for 3
You
months
just
in a
like
row.
to see me, that's all.
Yeah, we're glad to see you, yeah.
Well, as some of you, I think, actually met with my engineers and had some questions.
Yeah, so I was going to say that as kind of a little bit of a lead into this while Rick goes and looks for the map so you can see them, is we had a meeting with actually our two DOT board reps, our Mr. Mitchell, I think it's Mitchell, who is our actual Division 4 rep, and then the at-large Leo Daughtry, who was here as well. And we met with Kevin, and I can't think the other, I'm drawing a blank on the other two names.
Sam.
Addison Gainey, I think.
Yeah, Addison was one, yes, and I can't remember the other one. But Commissioner Harris and myself sat on that meeting, and the manager, Hester, was there. And, you know, I guess our question was the length of time that we would prefer to see a wider bridge section and try to shorten it down and find a different way to do it. And basically with the time constraints and the delays that it would take to redesign and then eventually do the project, we're just not going to be timely. And once you take something off the list, there's not any guarantees when it will get back on there. The other piece was when you hear 10.8 mile detour, I think that's what got all our attention. And that is a 10 mile if you were going from this side of the microphone or up, around and back to this side. But in fact, as I think Kevin described it to us, if you're coming from 210 from the McGee's area in to Smithfield, and you take the detour, it's like a mile and a half, maybe less than a mile difference in the travel in, and same way. And from conversations with our emergency services, they could make accommodations so that that would not be any significant impact on providing service. We did give us an opportunity to bring up other future projects, so that was a side benefit. But I think after meeting with them, and it was a very collaborative meeting, that this is probably as good as we're going to get. And again, as we know, the DOT, they don't build something based on speculation, so they're not going to build a 5-lane wide bridge and wait 30 years for it to be used. That's not the way they function and fund projects. So that was, I think Commissioner Harris both, as we were, this was good as it was going to get, and it will be an inconvenience, but not quite the inconvenience that we originally thought it was. So I don't know if Rick's still looking for the maps, but I'll let you go ahead, and we may have this solved by the time Rick gets back in here.
I think you already said everything.
Okay, well,
We're good.
Commissioner Harris, did I miss?
No, you're 100% on it. And I think once we sat down and really studied the project and spent some time with the DOT representation, it makes a lot more sense. And the detour, being the worst case scenario, like I said, if you went from point to
You live
point.
here and you have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not going to be the major inconvenience that we had thought. And it was an opportunity to try to push for some, additional things, but I think at the end of the day, we felt a lot better after looking at the maps and studying the process.
Mr. Chairman, you need a motion.
We do?
Motion, is it to approve the,
Easement
adopt
request, yeah.
the resolution authorizing is that what it is?
Yeah, request, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of granting the easement request, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See you next time.
See you
Have a happy birthday.
Come back and see us in January.
That's two tonight.
Open invitation for you.
Thank you all very much. You've
Thank
been
you.
very gracious.
Appreciate all your
Thank
help.
you.
Thank
Y'all
you.
have a good night.
You too.
I always wanted to ask her if she was related to Chuck. Lotto.
All right, so next item is a planning activity report, and then followed up with a comprehensive land use plan, our continued discussion. So do you have the activity report, or are we going to skip right to the?
We're going to skip right to the meeting.
All right, all right, there we go.
Hopefully get into it. So as we had promised a few meetings ago, we would take a look at the draft future land use map, at some of the quote-unquote donut holes, and would address those to see if there could be some minor modifications made to those. In discussing with the project team, what we've done is we've prepared a presentation for you that kind of, once again, kind of reinforces the methodology. And we'll look at least three areas within the presentation and show you how what changes what we propose to occur, if you so choose, and maybe the implications thereof. But at this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Meg Nealon if she come forward, or with Nealon Planning, who was our lead on the project.
Great, thank you. Good evening again.
Good evening.
Becoming regular here. It's nice to see all of you this evening. We have had conversations internally, as Mr. Newton suggested, that with the team and with staff, looking at some of the specifics in response to some questions that we know have been raised as it relates to the map. And one of our questions back to staff was any kinds of refinements to the mapping. We want to make sure that it is reflecting what this group, this board, and the community as a whole is looking for from a policy standpoint. So we looked at the map, and I'm gonna go ahead and flip through, get into some of the slides here. So what we've put together is a very brief presentation that looks at the map in its current form, and then looks at some of the specifics as we scan around the map and think about what your opportunities are as it relates to future development and what can be supported with infrastructure.
Excuse me, are we gonna get a piece of paper, or we gotta look at it up there?
It's on here, I think. I got it in the Dropbox.
Okay. Evidently, I didn't get that.
Well, and I'm happy to stop on any of these slides so we can really look at them as we go along. Take a glance at those. So this is the current map. Yeah, sorry.
I say you can use my Dropbox if you like.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So looking again at the place types, as you know, it offers a greater variety, greater range than you presently have in Johnston County to consider in accommodating future development. So we think this will serve you well. The questions were more at a more granular level, looking at specific parcels and thinking about what the potential is for reaching those with infrastructure, specifically utilities. And so as we examined those a bit closer, and this was just in the presentation, so you'd have that description of the place types once again accessible. So let's look at the agricultural area, which is one of those place types, and that was one of the ones that's had a lot of discussion to date. And just as a refresher, we've talked about the idea of what constitutes agricultural area in the mapping to date. A lot of that encompasses what's considered to be viable agriculture, so we want to revisit what that means, because yes, it does acknowledge what's on the ground today, but also acknowledges some potential for agriculture being part of the mix in the future, knowing that those adjustments can be made. Now, again, this is a plan document, not regulations, so it's not indicating zoning, but instead a land use policy. Related to this is the plan goal that came through the process of farmland being preserved, and that the agricultural industry continues to thrive as a piece of the local economy. An example of a policy statement that goes along with that is minimizing the potential for intense residential development in agricultural areas. Some of what we were hearing through the process was the potential for some of the agricultural land that's in operation today to be impacted by adjacent development that's coming online, particularly residential development, and you've got new neighborhoods next to farms that are operating and affecting those operations. So that's just an example of what's intended by color on a map. So there's a lot more detail that goes into those types of that element in the plan. But just to stay with that theme for agricultural suitability, we wanted to share with you some of the specifics of what's behind that. So yes, if today it's a present use value designation, it's in there. We're also capturing conservation easements or areas with near those that are intended for agricultural use within or adjacent to the voluntary ag districts. So as you all know, those are in place to not only protect the farmers from nuisance law or from nuisance claims, things like that nature, lawsuits, but also to recognize some areas where contiguous farms have some ability to be more viable because of the sheer number of acres within that. Property size is a factor, the soils are a factor, and the concentration of these operations, where they're clustered together, in other words. I'm going to come back to some more about that in a minute, but looking at residential areas. So again, just looking at the map, a goal around that is to have fiscally efficient, compact growth to lessen the tax burden. So when we think about where development's going to occur over the long term, we're looking 20 years out, thinking about how to be good stewards of the county's resources, and looking for ways where growth can occur in a way that takes advantage of existing infrastructure or areas where infrastructure can be feasibly extended. So those are the priority areas. So we thought about the future residential types. We are targeting some areas where utilities could easily reach or already service area. And so a related policy example is that, related to that, is directing the future growth towards the municipalities. And so when you look at your utility service area, you look at your municipalities and the areas around those, as well as your interchange areas that are also identified as service areas. You have quite a bit of acreage in all of those areas. And so directing some of the future residential growth to those areas, there's alignment between that and where you're seeing these colors that represent the residential place types. So the suitability factor is there. Again, as we've talked about in the past, it's reflective of the kinds of things that a site selector that's looking for property to develop for residential purposes would also be looking at. So that list that you're seeing of suitability factors is in alignment with that type of site selector list. And so when we look at that suitability on the next slide, compare it to the suitability for agriculture, naturally, and if we showed you all of the suitability maps, you'd see overlap in all of these. So there are definitely parcels across your landscape that would be suitable for residential and suitable for agriculture and suitable for commercial. And so as we think about that, we're also thinking about the market projections and thinking about where things are likely to be drawn in the near term versus the post-20-year mark. And so as we sorted out those place types and they're applied to the maps, it's a recognition of where the county can more feasibly serve some of these areas in the near term versus something that would be a longer term opportunity. So we took a couple of examples and we're using these as suggestions of where if we were to change the map now, we still think that there is an opportunity for reflecting policy that is in keeping with what we've heard through the process. And so we're going to use a couple of examples here and show you those potential map changes to see if that is in keeping with what some of the conversations of this group
And Meg, I don't think, we don't have a copy of that, do we?
You do not, unless it should be, if it's in the Dropbox link, that's in there. Is that?
When did
No.
when did
Can't find it.
we get the Dropbox? You know when that came out?
I can't find it in the Dropbox.
When first, October 2022. And I'm saying it changes. When you
No, I'm
go
talking about the changes. I know what's in the old map.
Yeah.
So it's not in there. So all this new stuff that we're looking at, we didn't get a copy of that. We don't have a copy of that.
Sir, we just got finalized today.
No, that's, I think as this process is moving along, I think continue on and we'll get the information. We're not going to take any action tonight, but we do need to get that information.
Sure. So these are examples of how the map might change and be reflective of policy, and then it's a matter of quantity that you're considering. So we only pulled out these couple of areas to look at. For example, this one on this next slide is up against the Wake County line. This is an area that, on the other side of the line, it's the Marks Creek area, it's near Wendell, and so on. Utility services, and we've got the utility service map at the end of this presentation if we wanted to pull that up. But it's one of those areas that because of other service providers, like being able to access service provision from Raleigh that provides service to Wake County, that's a possibility. But when we look at that, it's an area that if it were to switch to a different type of place type, it may be a residential category. So, for example, we're looking at an area of 3,000 acres in this area. If it's agriculture right now, it's based on those suitability factors. We think that there is, because of that overlap in suitability, there's a possibility for a change there in that the service could come from another direction. So it too showed up in residential suitability and could be serviced in a different way. Another one is around Pine Level and Micro, close to here. So we've got some place types applied here, rural living and agricultural area. Once again, we're in areas that when you look at utility service area and other suitability factors, these are areas that are urbanizing. These are areas that have a possibility of supporting more. If that were to switch from agriculture in these areas and the rural living, the reason for doing that, and again, we're relying on some of the things that we are seeing in the suitability and what would be likely to happen in these areas, If it's to switch, what are the special circumstances that would indicate a policy change and therefore a policy map modification? We're looking at the fact that it's also suitable for residential development. It has some existing small-scale residential approved in those areas, so there's a possibility for consistency around that. And then it's close to the municipalities, so there's potential for municipal service being provided to those areas. So those are the kinds of things that we can give you as examples where we're looking for alignment with what makes sense on the ground given suitability, and also being able to recognize that there's overlap in those suitability exercises to identify that. One thing we are cautious about with this is not an oversupply of any particular type of place type, so that you're not getting so far out in terms of your total land area devoted to a type of place type that is well outside of what we anticipate from the market.
Hey, could I interrupt you a moment? Could we go back to the previous slide?
Mm-hmm.
We can't tell by that if it's within anybody's ETJ or not. Can we tell?
You can. It's the areas that have planning and zoning jurisdiction are in the black lines with the sort of the grayish lavender.
But I can't see where she's got it.
And I can actually go ahead and show
Some of it
you.
is and some of it's not, right?
This might be an easier map to look at. So you can see the planning and zoning jurisdiction there, and then the mapping that the county has done previously and called transitional areas, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
To see what those look like.
So the light gray on that map is
Your transitional areas.
The municipal transition zones that, I don't know where we still got them or not, I'm not sure.
Oh, so they're municipal transition zones or districts, not ETJ?
Okay.
Okay.
That's right. And there is a recommendation in the plan that those are revisited because of where you can feasibly extend water and sewer.
Okay, thank you.
So a couple things to think about here, and I think the second set of bullets and maybe the third would be the most important to draw your attention to is we're looking for logical phasing. And the reason you do that is to manage expectations, especially from the private sector point of view. What exactly are you suggesting the county can support in various areas? So too many different place types that suggest growth throughout the area that the county is not prepared to serve is something that you don't want to create that expectation that you're going to provide it where feasibly you would not do so in the near term. Being able to make sound investments, so the justification for when and where you extend services, it provides that rationale. And then the last piece of it is the job creation. So when you're promoting the job creation, which Johnston County has been strong on for many years, that allocation of capacity, you're making sure that's reserved for the employment that you want to continue to attract to Johnston County and not lose that to other uses. The maintaining property values is also key. So I started to talk about that a little bit. That overabundance of land devoted to certain types of place types and suggesting that you would support more than is actually coming to the county just puts you in a position of devaluing properties potentially. So we can share some stories of some communities that have overzoned and overplanned for commercial uses, for example, and the lack of competition or the lack of, some key places where that development wanted to be concentrated meant that there were too many choices, and it actually created the reverse. When it was intended to be an economic development tool, it did the reverse and diluted the situation, and too many choices ended up making it a not so vibrant location for commercial development. So we want to be careful of that too. Right now, the amount of growth that's projected for Johnston County could fit in your ETJs. We have, through this process in what we call the land supply identified more than double what you need for supporting growth over the next couple of decades. And then you add in that into that some of the areas that are already identified as utility service areas, and it's more than double what you need. So that's part of that application too, is we're being really careful about how much total is out there so that you maintain the value of your land over time. So, but we're just presenting these ideas tonight as a way to think about the policy component behind what's on the mapping, so it's not just a color, but instead a reflection of the written policies that are in the plan. And I'll stop there and see if you have any questions, and that may be enough for food for thought for the evening.
And when will we have this information available? Peruse over it.
Yeah, when will we get the I guess, the changes and maps so we can actually take a look at them? Does that just print them out and?
I can draw that to you tomorrow. I can't do it by email because I won't have the box tomorrow. Our email's limited to 25 megabytes, so I have to drop it through.
Can you,
Drop it through internal network.
will it go in Dropbox or no? Is that too big?
No, we can get it to Dropbox.
Okay, I mean, I think that's what we,
Internal network.
Yeah.
okay,
Dropbox.
all right.
We can also have our team share the map specifically,
You did.
See,
if that's helpful.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner, so I did have a few, not necessarily related
Okay.
to what, but I will say I do like to where we're looking at the donut holes of agriculture and looking at the option of making that something other than agriculture. So I do like that. I guess the one thing for me is as I read through this plan is it's a little bit disconnected in places. We have goals up in one section, and then we have the objectives and policies. So somewhere I would like to see there's a flow so we have a clear, this is the objective, here's the policy, here's the goal, here's the objective, and here's the policy.
Got it.
And so having that spelled out. And I guess the other thing, I think some of the stuff we do is general in nature, and I'll just give an example. When we say support the municipalities, what exactly does that mean and what we do? Is it some financial support? Is it, some other infrastructure improvements? Is it water and sewer? What exactly, how do we support? What does that mean? So I think throughout, there's probably some things, and we say coordinate with municipalities. Well, what exactly does that mean? So I think there's a lot of vague words that we may need to make a little more specific. And then there's sometimes, when we say encourage, and I get there's both sides of it, but I think that's something for this board. Do we strengthen, some of the words I don't know that requires, I don't go that far, but some have a little more teeth in things that we want to do. So that's my personal opinion, is we need to provide some teeth to it. But also the main thing is the goals, objectives, and policies to be clearly stated, so I don't have to look in one place, go find it in another, and then see what's in there, and then clarify and provide details on some of that. So let me see if there's what else that I have here in my notes. Again, I think in L2, we're talking about concentrate commercial development and activity nodes. And again, I think that's what we want to do, but we say may include in there. And so I think maybe some policies that relate to sewer extension and stuff like that. And I'll try to email Braston, some of my comments on here, but those are, I'll say those are general. I don't want to discuss every one, but I think the biggest thing is having something when, somebody picks this plan up to look at it, they can clearly see here's our goal, and here is the objective, and here's the policies that we intend to implement or have to help implement that. So that's my general comments. Any
The only two comments I have is when we talk about municipal limits, Meg, we got two towns I know of that do not have service, that they're using Johnston County service. They don't have their own facilities. And that be, that's of a concern to me when you talk about that being, whether it's a true municipal service or not, or limits, are they true limits? And that's a concern to me.
Okay.
I think some of that from the regionalization study we heard this morning, I think there may be some alternatives there that we have those and address those in some of our regional studies to see the impact of how we handle those. Yes, sir.
I just am amazed as I sit here and reflect on the day. It seems to me that we talk out of both sides of our mouths. We sat here this morning, we had our cities come hat in hand asking for money and wanting money so they could provide services. We've got cities whose sewer and water lines malfunction and need millions upon millions of dollars to get right. And so here we are as commissioners supporting financially the cities, dealing with defective infrastructure, which we talk about all the time. And yet out of the other side of our mouths we say, well, we want to drive all the development and all the growth of this county, and we want to put it all in the hands of the cities who cannot financially handle it. I just don't see any logic in that plan. And as I read, first off, so everybody know, I'm a conservative. If you don't know that, I want to make sure you know that. I'm not a sadist. I don't believe government should be planning but so much. Because every time I see government planning it, it gets messed up. Whether it's disease control, whether it's the post office, whether it's now our military, and whether it's our elections, it just goes on and on and on. And when we talk about managing landowner and investor expectations, we're talking about the government saying that it wants to manage the private sector. I can't support that. The private sector and freedom is what's made this country what it is today. It's what's made us the greatest country in the world. And every time government comes in and tries to manage the private sector, the results is not good. And I know this is not popular to say in many quarters, but I can't go home and not say it. And so I realize that we've got to have some rules of the game. I'm not opposed to some rules as to how things are developed. But it's just been my experience that when the private sector works with the public sector, you get a good outcome. And I can only, I didn't get to go to land planning public policy school. I didn't get to go to Carolina. And so, but I do have experience of working with the town of Clayton as a private developer and having a tract of land that was 2 or 3 miles outside of the town of Clayton. And they had problems with their water and sewer. And so we said, okay, let's work together. I'll put up $1 million or whatever it was, and we'll build a community out there, a mixed-use community, which you talk about in your plans. But to limit where that's, to be smart enough to say we can limit where that's going to be, how that's going to happen, and take the free private sector out of the mix, we're not going to be in what I think we can be as a county. And I don't want to be negative, but I can't go to bed tonight without having said what I just said.
So let me ask you a question then for clarification. Then what sort of land use plan would we have? I mean, when I hear you say that, I hear us being reactive to where water, sewer, and future stuff goes rather than proactive.
No, I'm not saying that, Butch. I'm just.
That's why I asked for clarification.
I'm just saying. But when I see we're going to manage landowners, there's a difference in setting the rules of the game, or how mixed-use developments could be developed, or how land could be used. For us to manage investor expectations, if the investor doesn't have enough sense to have his own expectations without the government telling him what he needs to do, we're in bad shape, and that investor's in bad shape. I mean, this needs to be a collaborative effort where we have rules that say, we want these types of developments in Johnston County. We want these types of places, quality places for people to live. And these places can be in cities, or they can be in other places, assuming that the developer, if water or sewer has to be expended, writes a check and does it. But to say he can't, or she can't, or it can't, is to just cut off the free market and private enterprise.
I would say, when I hear you say manage, but also provide guidelines, to me, this is the guideline. We're not managing investors on how they do so. We are setting the guidelines for them. This is a,
Butch,
I won't say temporary, but let me finish.
No, but you're a smart guy. Read that first thing. Manage landowner and investor expectations.
So that's words. That's not in part of our plan. I don't think. I think that's what she put up there tonight. So I would say I would agree with you on that. That does not need to be in our plan.
I'm just reading what's.
So I get it, but I didn't hear her say that. I mean, I heard her explain it on that, but her explanation. But I think the land use plan itself is a guideline for us to go by. It is not to, and I have to look up there now, manage landowner and investors' expectations. I would agree with that piece. But I do think this is an important document that we are establishing guidelines for that.
I'm not disagreeing. I think we need to work with the document. I'm just trying to talk philosophically about what I think the outcome of that document should be. And those, again, I didn't get those till tonight, and so I'm just reacting. And I assume that was a serious person who is competent put that up on that screen for some reason.
Okay, well, we're not that, so thanks for the clarification. I don't think we're that far off, because I agree. But I also think that second piece up there, that we make sound investments in our utilities expansion, so that's another piece that's up there.
I agree we need to make sound investments, but we don't need to close the door to other private sectors who want to make those investments for us. that want to make those investments for us.
But I don't think there's anything in our plan that prohibits that. I mean, if you take away that one word on the street, I don't think there's anything in our plan that says they can't do that, particularly with the conditional use stuff that we had now, but I don't think there's anything prohibits that.
Well,
Unless you've read something that I haven't read.
I'll let it go.
But I don't think we're that, I don't think we're that far apart, personally, but any other comments? None. So dare I bring this up? We need to have a public hearing at some point on this. Doesn't mean we're done with the process, but at some point we've got to have a public hearing. And given this not happening this year, I would like to try to do something late January at probably a special meeting, because I don't think it's going to hold the folks here. At least I may be wrong on that, but do y'all have any issues directing staff to look at a location and a date in late February for us to have that public hearing, to go ahead and get it publicized and get that part of the process completed?
Well, all I would say, but you rightfully point out that this plan needs to be improved. It needs to have goals, objectives, and policies. We don't even have that. And that I think this is, in my opinion, it's like a game of tennis. We threw the tennis ball out there, we hit it across the net to the consultants and to the public and said, y'all come up with something. They did. They came up with something to hit the ball back to us. Until we determine as commissioners some of those policies and things, we don't need to be hitting the ball back across the court again.
Yeah, I think, and Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, so we may not have, I know it says the words goals, objectives, and policies, but there's circles and diamonds and other that I think are policies and goals and objectives and all that. I'm sorry to get the order wrong, but some way of better clarifying that so we can clearly understand what that is.
Yeah, there's solid diamonds and there's open diamonds, and I think we were just struggling trying to figure out what.
Yep.
And that's why I suggested 2 or 3 months ago that we set up some committees who could roll their sleeves up and find out what this document says. I don't think we know it well enough to pass on it, because we've not rolled our sleeves up and done the heavy lifting.
I don't want to speak for others on the board, but I think I've rolled my sleeves up on it. So, and we've talked about committees and then stuff being behind the scenes. So I don't want to go back to committees at this point, but it does require every commissioner to roll up their sleeves, and because it is and I believe you said this before, this is probably the most critical document that we're going to do during our terms, because we're setting the pace and the goals for the next 30 years. I think, is it 2050, 2040? So this is important.
And Chairman, I know a couple of us have discussed it, amongst ourselves. And, one of the things I felt like when we have been looking at this is we're looking at a 10,000-foot view. So now our job is, I've had some thoughts and ideas of things that I would like to implement to my plan. I'm going to make sure logistically they make sense with the planning department. I'm kind of digging in now to get a lot of my specific questions answered of how do we start towards some type of strategy implementation. And for me, it's kind of making a list of top 5 priorities and ways that I can envision the outline that they have created come together. And I think it would be, I think if every commissioner did that, especially with regards to our districts, we could kind of come up with if we just come up with 5 priorities between the commissioners, we've got our top 35 priorities to really dive and dig into and figure out what is logistically feasible. That's my personal plan.
All right. Yeah, and I think, we have a starting point. We have how many of those 12, 14 goals already in that's part of the public process. If there's, and I personally think there's some combinations in there we can do, but, and if we want to get ours and see where they match up in here, I'm fine with that. But I think the the key is going to be, we've got to get beyond the 30,000 foot level, the 10,000, and get in there with specific ideas and comments. And I think Commissioner Smith has been pretty specific on some of his issues, and we've had others that have specific issues. But I think that, we do have to do that. We have to get into, this is a details document, so we need to make sure we're in that. But back to so I didn't hear much traction for trying to schedule a public hearing at this point. So we're just going to hold off and wait till January till we come back with some detailed recommendations.
I think that's a good idea. I think if we all have our ideas of ways we feel like we can, really start to put some changes and implementations in place, the public's they've seen this. Now we've got to show them what the next level looks like. Now we have to show them, let's get in the weeds and what does that mean for them and get their feedback of actually seeing specific details of changes that we're planning to make.
And I think I don't feel like we're that far off. I think the document has good backbone, and we've got 80% of it, or maybe a little better, that we can agree on. But there is the finer points that we need to work out. But I'll wait till January till we look at a public hearing. But I guess the question I have for staff is some of the things we've talked about tonight about clarifying goals and objectives and policies, at least putting so we can follow those a little more readily. And then again, options to have more specifics in what certain things mean and how do, and the policy, what that is. How do we support,
I think we
maintaining agriculture?
I think we need to define the what before we start working on the how. I think we got to know what we want. We got to establish. We've got goals, but not every goal in there is going to be Fred's goal or April's goal or Tony. We're all going to have different ideas about them. So I think we're going to have to let this be a topic of just have a meeting just to discuss this if that's what it takes. But I think we need to decide what and then how. And not everything on there is going to be something we're going to be able to bring into policy and I for one would like to see us take into consideration that, we got to make sure we don't over-regulate or, carry our authority too far that we got to approve every little thing, because that's not a good thing.
Was that, I don't mind laying it on the table tonight. We fundamentally, and Dickie's right, fundamentally, we as a board need to decide. Because there's some on this board that believe development's bad, and we're going to stop it, and we're going to make every lot be 40,000 square feet. I wouldn't vote for that come hell or high water.
Neither would I.
But we as the board don't know, is that what we believe? Or are we going to try to make efficient use of our land? Are we going to try to make efficient use of our water and sewer? Are we going to try to make communities that have amenities? What are we going to do? And until we can do that, as good as Meg and Ben are, they can be the greatest consultants in the world, but when we can't tell them what the hell we want to do, they don't know what to do. They're just experts. They can draw it up however we want them to. But we gotta decide, what do we want to do? We got to tell Braston and Jennifer and the staff, this is where we want to go. This is what we want this county to look like. And if we want this county to look like a county with a bunch of septic tanks and using land up so that 20 years from now we don't have enough land, if we want to avoid the fact that one of the crises in America today is affordable housing, and people can't find a place to live because they can't get a job to make enough money to pay what housing now costs. Workforce people need housing. We're not like San Francisco, but we don't even need to go in that direction. And those are fun, that's what the board's job is. What's the vision of where we want this county to go? What do we want this county to look like? And we need to decide that. And it's tough. I know it's tough because there are different opinions, but that's our job. It's our job to decide which way we're going to go.
Well, I will agree with that. I'll come back with the plan for this board for a long time has been pushing growth towards municipalities. I mean, that has been the plan.
I understand that. But our plan is also, our municipalities don't have the financial resources to support that. And it says we need to encourage them. You know, it's amazing to me. I got this little subdivision up in Clayton called Riverwood. It's bigger than 5 of the cities in this county. I got more residents in Riverwood that I manage with a homeowners association than 5 of the cities in this county. And I mean, this county, we're getting to be prime time. We've got to step our game up.
So we've had 4 meetings on this so far that has primarily been led by us. So if there hasn't been discussion on our what, then that's our fault. So if you want to discuss the what, then we need to discuss the what and not sit here and talk about it. So I would say the next meeting, come to discuss the what, and I don't want to be 4 meetings from now, we're still trying to figure out the what, because we've had ample opportunity for everybody up here to speak about what that is.
I think everybody's got a different opinion.
It's going to come down to, like this morning, we're going to have to raise some hands to do it. But if we're going to talk about the what, then we need to talk about the what and move on, because we're going to be here this time next year at this rate. So study over the holidays and bring your whats and your suggestions so that we can all talk about it, because otherwise I don't see us moving anywhere, and it's a frustrating process for us. And I agree, we got 7 of us and 7 different opinions, some more different than others, but we've got to move forward on this thing. And there's parts I think that we agree on, but the what, we've got to figure out what that is and move on with it, because right now we're not very far along from where we started, in my opinion.
Let me tell you one lesson that I learned. When the good people of Johnston County sent me to the Senate, they sent me to the University of Carolina in Chapel Hill to be trained. And I don't go over there unless I have to, but I went over there. And so...
I'll let that slide.
Unless we're going to win a football game. And so I don't remember anything they taught me at that class, but one thing. It stuck with me, and it's so true. And they told our class, just want you to understand, they didn't elect you to go make the easy decisions. All the easy decisions have already been made. They elected you to go make the hard decisions, the 51-49 decisions. That's what we got to do. I understand this isn't easy. I understand we have differences of opinion, but we are the body that our citizens have said, you've got to decide. You got to make the hard decisions because we sent you up there. And to not do that is a dereliction of duty.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody up here that would disagree with that. So I think that's what we didn't get elected by people the same as you. We didn't just make easy decisions. It's the hard decision, and that's why we're up here discussing this for the 4th meeting in a row. And we still have a long way to go, but we've got to move the ball down the court. So if we're still deciding what our main issues are. We need to get that resolved so we can move on and get this thing.
Well,
I think we need a
Done.
common issue that we all agree on.
well, maybe I'll throw this out. It may be the craziest idea in the world. But it hurts nothing to have the public hearing to listen to them, and we still hadn't done anything, Fred, we still haven't done anything. We gotta have a public hearing no matter what. Okay? We don't have to stop. We can move forward, but at least we've fulfilled the public hearing portion of it, and it don't mean we gotta act on it right then. In my opinion, I'm just throwing that out. It may be, if they send us up here, they need to have a voice.
Well, and that's what I was saying. I think if we can, sit down and each commissioner put together our top 5 main points and then us get back together, I think the next time we go to the public that we've got to have some more specifics to take them.
I agree with that. I think that's so true.
And if we all have our top 5, priorities that are coordinating with, our current plan, then I think we'll be able to rank them based on what we all agree is the prime priorities, and we start there.
So I'll say this is our 4th meeting on this, and if you haven't expressed your top priorities, you need to make sure that you express them come January, because we've had ample opportunity to talk about, and we've heard agriculture and taking people's property rights. So we've talked about a lot of things that I think we kind of all agreed on. But if you have others, then we need to bring those to the table and let's discuss them. And I think our priorities there may be stuff that's in here, I'm pointing to the land use plan, that our priorities may not line up with, but that we've got to include and address anyway. But we need to, like I said, in January, our first meeting, your top priorities, your top issues. I'm trying to put mine out there all along, but there's not going to be any excuses for not coming prepared in January to discuss the issues that you have and want to see addressed in this plan and make sure they're addressed. So I'll leave that at that. And Mr. Bradley, I agree with you. I think let's wait till January, and I do think it does make sense to have something a little more firm for the public to comment on, because I don't want them to comment and then we change the whole playbook on them. So, not that I don't think we will.
I think in essence, I think the commissioner's right over there. It's their decision. We can listen to them, but at the end of the day, the buck stops here.
Yeah.
So
anybody want to kick the dying horse one more time?
No, I'm done with it.
I'm going to bring you my list.
Thank everybody for, it is tough, and I think we'll probably have a few more, probably a lot more tough discussions on it. But again, at the end of the day, we're all going to, it might be 4-3. I don't think it's going to be 7-0, but it might be 4-3 and somewhere in between. But that we're going to have to all raise our hands and move on from this. So we'll hold off doing anything else. But if there's something you can do in the meantime as far as helping us understand that connection from goals, to objectives, to policies, I think that would be very helpful for us, and do it in I hate to say a short period of time, but it's a time, and for the next meeting, have information ahead of time so that we're not looking at it the first time here. So, all right, Lord God, let me find out where we are.
You're on.
In here, we're on manager reports and comments. So, Rick. Okay.
Is that butt? Oh, yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have at your desk a First Amendment to a resolution authorizing the amount to be spent by the Johnston County Board of Education to acquire real property to be used for a school project site. On October the 17th, 2022, you approved a resolution to acquire approximately 90 acres of real property on the north side of Towton Farm Road in Smithfield, Johnston County. And upon additional review and additional discussions with the property owner, we have gotten information that additional acreage on that parcel is available for acquisition. and that property could be used for the purposes of the school site project, as well as opportunities for parks, open space, and greenways. And so what we have done is taken this resolution, and you originally approved 90 acres for acquisition. We now have the opportunity to acquire a total of 211 acres, and that purchase price is $4.2 million. And the concept would be very similar to what you did with the art property. And that acquisition is the Johnston County Board of Education would do all of the due diligence, confirm the suitability, those sorts of things, and then at closing, once the school gets laid out and that sort of thing, then there would be a deed that goes to the Johnston County Board of Commissioners for the portion that would be utilized for that parks, open space, and greenways. So I have that for your consideration. If that is something that you want us to move forward with concurrently with the Board of Education, then it would be my recommendation that you adopt this amended resolution.
Could I be a pain in pointing out a small typo?
There are more than one typo, and I confess that because I did it between meetings, and Madam Clerk had not had the opportunity to proof it. She has proofed it. She has fixed the header. She has fixed the signature lines and all of those things
Thanks for falling on the sword for me.
that Madam Clerk is so good at. She has taken care of those and actually was able to do that right before this meeting, and it is on letterhead and looks really nice. And she took care of all of that for me because, as you well know, nothing should go out of your office without having somebody else look at it. And
Amen.
and we did that, and that is why this was a draft copy, and Madam Clerk is always the one that is responsible for making sure that the finalized version gets out. So I apologize for those
Just blame it on the new girl.
typos. No, it was all me. It was all me. I typed it, and Dana took the liberty of cleaning up all of my mistakes. So I thank you for that, Dana.
I'm glad I don't work for you.
I thought I was nitpicky.
Well, I'm trying to find out.
Circling things.
Yeah.
I was trying to determine what.
What ought meant?
Yeah, what
That's actually what Dana said to me.
Overtime, maybe overtime or something.
That should be. That should be 2.
A little humor there, Counselor.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Is that your question?
That's my question.
Okay. All right. I hear a motion.
I would make a motion. I just need to make sure I did it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the First Amendment to the resolution authorizing the amount to be spent by the Johnston County Board of Education to acquire real property to be used for a school project site.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries and the resolution is adopted.
Thank you. And there's no other item for manager comment.
Okay. Board reports and comments. So,
You going to bring up the two things we talked?
yeah, I have 3.
Okay.
One is since we talked about our the first meeting for our clerk, we have a second meeting now for our deputy clerk. And I want to say Susie Love, but I know that's her maiden name, so. Reeves. I think you had to start with R. So Susie Reeves, so congratulations on almost completing your second meeting, and I will say you've had 2 heck of a first meetings. Welcome to the boardroom. The other is I did want to send condolences to the family of Freddie Stansel. He was a member of our airport authority and a big part of Johnston County community and meant a lot to our community. So I did want to send along the board's condolences to the Stansel family. I also wanted to mention that Commissioner Smith, his brother passed away in the past week, so condolences and sympathy to the Smith family. Again, big part of the Archer Lodge and the Riverwood community. It seems like forever that Irvin was coaching some kind of sport there in the community, so condolences to your family. And I think that's the only, I guess, well, there is one more thing. So we have started the process with our PIO office, Adam and Ben, and met with several of our departments about looking at updating the branding for the county so that we don't have 15 or 16 or 20 different things that are out there and kind of a hodgepodge of things. So Adam will update us on that maybe at a future meeting in January on that. So, but that's the only things that I have, so I'm ready. Unless anybody else has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all.